כן?
כשאני נולדתי רמי, אתה יודע. ואני הייתי הראשון שעלה עם הבן הזה בבטן
כן.
לאירלנדיה.
לאן?
אירלנדיה.
אירלנד.
כן, אירלנד.
אז לא אירלנדיה. מישהו אומר אירלנדיה?
אני לא יודע, אירלנד, בעברית זה אירלנד. אז באירלנד, בזמן הזה, הוא נולד, יש לו דרכון.
כן. אוקיי.
עכשיו החוק הזה השתנה. אבל בזמן הזה לפני 20 שנה, הוא נולד באירלנד, יש לו דרכון אירופי, וגם היה לו אמריקני, בזמן הזה נתתי לו אזרחות אמריקנית, והיה לו גם יפנית, מהאמא שלו.
וואו, ככה 3 דרכונים?
היה אפשר גם לקבל יוונית, אבל אני ויתרתי את זה. אני לא רציתי אם הוא נוסע פעם ביוון ואומרים אתה צריך ללכת לצבא יוון.
לא רצית שזה יהיה. אוקיי, I'll start. מה?
גיוס?
גיוס, כן, לצבא, draft.
באירלנדיה אין גיוס.
כן, באירלנד.
אבל...
רגע, אני אלך להביא את המיקרופון, רגע.
Hello. Let me switch. What's it called?
Do they have water there?
They have water? Upstairs there should be water. I don't know.
No, I mean you just looks like you wash your hands.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a sink.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Are there toilets there too?
The toilet's upstairs. You have to hike for that one.
I don't need it now, but I just wonder.
There you just have to give yourself enough time to run up. You know, there's how many people in the house, so there might be a line.
Okay. Connect this. So, if you can hear me better. Yeah, I want to. A friend of mine from Taichung is listening, and I want to make sure if. Let me ask you. Can you hear me better? Would you mind closing the door, Rick? Sure. כן. Oh, Ruben is coming. כן, ראיתי על הבן אדם הזה, זה ממש לא טוב, ממש לא טוב. ממש לא טוב. ממש לא טוב, כן, ראיתי, לא טוב. לא.
בחור צעיר,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Is this how many people are logged in?
No, he just asked me to count to 20. Then he can hear me. I also want him to hear Betzalel, so that's why I put the microphone so he can hear.
You see his pants? You have Simran.
Oh, you got $100 in your pants.
On his pants.
Well, that's the idol of Taiwanese.
Okay.
אז היא הביא בחור צעיר, לפסח היה זה, מה זה היה? חג צעיר, סיני. ואני שאלתי מי זה.
מתי זה היה?
אנדריה.
מתי זה היה?
היה במלון. במלון.
אוקיי.
אז היה בחור צעיר ואני שאלתי מי זה, והיא אמרה זה מה זה?
I take 3 or is that making too much to pick up myself?
You can take as much. You can take as much as you want.
I don't want to buy the others.
It's okay. Ruben is coming. Marty isn't coming. So yeah, you can get more cookies.
I'll have Marty.
There's. Yeah, you can have Marty's. Hello, Ruben. בוא תגידי אחר כך. אני רוצה להתחיל שעה זה. Okay, so there was very intense elections in Israel in 1981. It seems like all elections in Israel are very intense, but there was one intense campaign, 1981, and what made it so unique was that the apparent split between Sephardi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews seemed to play a big role. There was an individual named Dudu Topaz, which was a famous celebrity in Israel, that went and had a speech before the elections, and he was criticizing the Sephardi Jews. He was saying bad-mouthing, he was saying bad names for Jews that come from North African countries and so on. And the very next day, the person who ended up winning the elections, although the odds were not very good at the beginning, named Menachem Begin, which I'm sure you all have heard about, used the same speech. And in fact, instead of criticizing, he was trying to put together people. He was criticizing the one who criticizes. And he brought a story about, that's Menachem Begin, if somebody remembers his very fierce. Oh, you recall? You remember. Okay. It is your lifetime. Okay, Menachem Begin was was a character, all right. So he was telling a story about the time when Israel was under the British mandate, and it was at the time when the Israelis, the Jews, were trying to put together a country, a state, and of course we know the Balfour Declaration and the UN votes and everything. I wasn't there.
He gave much cheerful attention to the British, being a member of the Stern Gang, as I recall.
Oh yeah, he was an active member, but he was telling a story about two people who were arrested by the Brits for sabotaging.
No, he wasn't.
I think so.
He was a part of the. I'm not sure which.
Stern Gang was called Bechi, and he was.
He was the more radical.
He was Haganah, I think. He was
more radical than the Haganah.
No, Etzel is smaller name. Etzel is a smaller name. Haganah.
He was more radical than the Haganah.
What Irgun?
Irgun.
Irgun, you're right. Not
Okay.
Irgun, right.
Okay.
Good for you.
Okay. I must say it's before my time.
But the Irgun were like, they didn't mess around.
And in
British
particular,
people.
before that
They went after
time,
them.
it was long after his time in whatever military organization.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is in politics. But he was retelling a story about the British soldiers arresting two people from the underground warriors. One was Moshe Barazani, a person who his family descent from Iraq, and the other was Meir Feinstein, and they were both.
Feinstein?
Yeah, Meir Feinstein.
San Francisco?
I don't know.
M-A-Y-E-R, not M-A-Y-O-R.
M-E-I-R. Mayor.
Some places
We had Mayor Feinstein in San Francisco.
Okay, well, Feinstein is a Jewish name.
Yeah.
It is a Jewish name.
So
the Brits wanted to execute these two people for their partaking in all kinds of sabotage against the British Army, and they decided to take him to the gallows. And within the detention center they were at, they managed to smuggle in a hand grenade, and their plan was to blow up the hand grenade while they were taken to the gallows, and thus killing, of course, themselves, but also with that British soldiers as much as possible. Unfortunately, their plan got screwed up because Rabbi Goldman decided to escort them to the gallows, and of course they wouldn't want to do anything to the rabbi, so they had to improvise a different plan. They had the hand grenade. I think it was hidden inside orange peels. Looked like an orange, and probably. Watch next time you peel an orange. Watch your back. Anyway, they decided they won't let the Brits the honor of killing them, and they'd rather kill themselves. So they actually hugged each other, they embraced each other, and they activated the hand grenade, and they died. And Menachem Begin told that story with about people criticizing, Sephardi Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, and his famous quote was, Ashkenazim, Irakim, Yehudim, he says Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi Jews, that's what they are. We are Jews, they were Jews. There's no reason for that segregation, there's no reason for that separation that we have within our nation, and that of course leads us to a very important question that we know there's a difference and distinction, and we want to find out what it is and whether it's a good thing or not. What?
The food.
I have the feeling that we are honoring the Brits today because we're speaking their language and not ours.
Oh, well, there's in Hebrew we say ratzui and matzui. You know the difference between ratzui and matzui?
I know the difference between Mishlosh Atzlan.
We're going back to California politics.
Not much
The
more.
Assemblyman.
Not much more than speaking English honors the Germans.
Then speaking English honors the Germans.
Speaking Yiddish
Yiddish.
honors the Germans.
Well, Bezalel advises we should all speak in Hebrew, and then that honors the Jews. So I would have loved that. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Working on it. Bezalel, it's working on. It's in progress. We're moving forward. Every day we learn new words.
There was still an email that they proposed 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. We're working on that too.
You can dig it out of your trash box.
No, I never put it in my trash box. It's in my inbox.
Why do you put it on the front burner?
Oh, the front. Oh boy. Okay, so everyone has the notion of being one nation and being together. Togetherness is a wonderful thing, and we all try to find what sets us in common. And when we look at the book of Numbers, and specifically the beginning, the counting of the Jews, we could see a very explicit segregation between the tribes. Every tribe has a different place they have to park, they have to camp. Everyone has a different flag, different color, different motto, and they all shouldn't mix. We will see later about not mixing, and that poses a question of why is it so? Yes?
Because Jews even back then had trouble getting along with each other.
Okay, well, even within their tribes,
I
there were...
was thinking something that was more longer during, but surely part of that, the separation with southern and northern kingdom, which in a big way followed the old tribal divisions.
It did follow the old tribal divisions, but it wasn't
Exactly.
it wasn't a division heavenly made. Obviously, this division was condemned.
Well, when the detailed one coming here, there was a tiny lamb heavenly made. You remember the wise Rehavam?
Okay, yes, of course, the son of
Rehavam
Shlomo.
was supposed to have been a kind of sub-king, obedient to Rehavam.
Yeah.
That he wasn't, but even that he was supposed to be as much as that, gives a tiny enough heavenly made to that.
Correct, but throughout generations, and specifically looking back from where we are, we condemn that distinction. And specifically with the stories you quote about some of our people calling the enemies to support their campaign against their own brothers and sisters, which is obviously unheard of. Nothing within the realm of what we're talking about has to do with wars. But the question is about the segregation. Why is it so? Why every tribe has its own camp, has its own borders and its own flag? What is the reason? Why can't we all be together? Why can't we just mix? And asking that question in probably a more progressive way, you walk into a synagogue, even to our little synagogue here in Taiwan, and I can count from here 5 different prayer books, right? Excluding the Spanish and the Italian and the French what we have, but just the Hebrew one, we can count 5 different prayer books, and it's not the same page number, and some of the services are not aligned the same way. Why is it so? Why can't there be one prayer, one sitter? Why Ashkenazi Jews eat that, and Sephardi Jews eat that, and all these? Why is it so? Why can't we get everyone do the same thing?
Shlomo, I did not know the topic of today's lesson. I came in, but somehow before the lesson we were talking just about this. Like, why should we be defined by the name of the hospital?
Right, or the way we're descent, right? So we should know this unity was attained right before the giving of the Torah. This week we commemorated, last week we commemorated the giving of the Torah, not the giving of the cheesecake, Rick. That's a different celebration. The giving of the Torah was the note.
Even Moshe,
So the Jewish people,
to Moshe.
Yes, to Moshe that gave us the tablets, right? That Moshe, his descendant,
his healer,
his successor. So the book of Numbers has in it the beginning of the book, of course, a preparation for the giving of the Torah. The Jewish people, we read it, are camping in front of Mount Sinai, and it says, Ke'ish echad v'lev echad, as one man with one heart. They all had the same intention in mind, and they all were doing the same thing and getting ready to receive the Torah from God. And it's interesting how this is always the connotation and the context of when the Torah is given. In Parsha Bamidbar, we read last week, and we're continuing to read this week, we read about the segregation. So on one hand, we have everybody together, and then on the other hand, we have the exact counting of the tribes, and everyone has to be in their camp. As I said, we're going to see later the quotes, no mixing, no moving from one place to another. It's the same figure. Everything is counted and measured. And the way they parked, right, we have the camp of Dan, which consists of, in the north, of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. The camp of Judah, which had Judah, Issachar, and Zvulun, which was, by the way, the biggest one, the biggest camp. We have the camp of Ephraim, which had Benjamin, Menashe, and Ephraim.
Not called camp of Yosef or Rachel?
These names are also interesting. Why the source of why every three tribes had united under one flag.
That these tribes united is obvious.
Yeah.
In their history. But
Okay, Rachel.
Yosef or Rachel would have been more obvious names.
Maybe because that's the common denominator between and the camp of Reuben.
Ephraim.
Yeah. And the tabernacle, that was, by the way, the way that was laid out also was from God, who's at the north, who's at the east, and so on. And also around the tabernacle, we had the tribe of Levi, and within the distinction of the three families, Gershon, Kehat, and Merari, and Moses' camp was in the east, the inner east. So this is brought in our portion, in the last week's portion, also this week's portion, about the way the tribal the segregation, the way they were arranged and the way they encamped, and also later we'll see the way they journeyed through the desert. Now, like we said, this has to do a little bit, not the weekly portion reading, but what we were discussing about getting ready to receive the Torah. We always have Parasha Bamidbar, right? Okay, so first the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers. We have 10 portions. Now the first 5 cover 39 years. The last 5 cover 1 year in the desert. So the 39 years were semi-boring. There weren't too many occasions and too many things. I mean, you could imagine 39 years with Jews who can't tell directions could be
Leagues travel maybe it's more beautiful because a big part of the years they can stay back and forth in the
correct. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Did they have ulpan there in the desert?
Did they have ulpan? In fact, it's interesting you're asking this question, because one of the things our sages say about one of the praises they give the Jewish people who left Egypt was the fact shelo shinu et shmam, shelo shinu et levusham, shelo shinu et leshonam. They did not change their names, they did not change their dress, and they did not change their tongue or their language. Meaning, all throughout the time they were in Egypt, they kept their tradition in that way. On the other hand, there's a vast criticism about the Jews leaving Egypt, not knowing anything. They didn't know who God was, they didn't know all that. So we're not sure where exactly the truth, something, the way to reconcile.
They know what the God is, but they don't speak Hebrew.
Yeah, well, some things are more important than Hebrew. Hebrew is a language. It's important, but
that came from the same source.
Source is shorish, right? Shorish, source. Yeah, shorish, the same word, right? Shorish and source, isn't it the same? Okay, so here's about here Abarbanel gives us the introduction to the book of Numbers. Here comes the 4th book to tell the order of things in the desert. How did they journey, and how they parked, and what transpired along the way as they were wandering for 40 years. Indeed, the 10 portions are divided to 2.
I like the title.
Okay, you're right. Indeed, the 10 portions are divided to 2. The first 5 are to tell all their occurrences in the desert, while the last 5 will recount the 40th and last year in which they came near the promised land and the wars they had to wage for that, which is, of course, described as they approached Ammon and Moab and everything that happened, Balak and Bilam. All these stories that take place in the last year, like always, the year before, it all is all over. That's the most interesting one and the most full of events. So that's the book of Numbers. Now, the portion of Bamidbar, which begins the book of Numbers, is always related to Shavuot. It's always read before Shavuot. We spoke about it briefly in one of the holiday meals. What does Bamidbar, what does Midbar, which means desert, has to do with Shavuot? And the reason for that is, Midrash Tanchuma says, why was the Torah given in the desert? Since if it would be given in an inhabitant land, the tribe in which it was their lot would say, I am first. Therefore, the desert was chosen where all are equal. So if Torah would be to be given in Tel Aviv, all the residents of Tel Aviv will say, okay, Tel Aviv, that's where the Torah was given. What about San Francisco? They say, no Torah for us. Or if the Torah would be given in San Francisco, maybe San Francisco would be a little more normal than it is today. Rick.
San Francisco was a place that had great tolerance for diversity. No.
Yes.
They get jealous. They get jealous of the woman because she looks more feminine. But the point is, we're making a comment about the gay club in San Francisco.
Okay, I don't know anything about that.
To be outrageous, they have like a Halloween party that everybody talks about, whether they've seen it or not. The point is, because it was a very tolerant culture, you got a lot of creativity there. You got people who wanted to leave everywhere else they came, not just the gays. And that's why you have this concentration.
Okay, I hear you. He says tolerance works both ways. You can tolerate things that need to be tolerated.
Athens and Sparta,
yeah. What are you saying?
Not inhabitant, but inhabited.
I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a little. I should have gone over it. This is 3 years ago was when we gave that class last. So I should have. Sorry, I should have had more time.
His English has improved since. Don't worry.
No, his English was always good. He's a linguist.
No, yours.
Oh, mine is improved. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Somehow somebody suspected me of being ignorant in everything.
No, you're not ignorant.
Somebody pointing at me.
Nobody's pointing at you.
Talking to you about.
Yeah, he was talking about me.
Typo, he would fix today.
Yeah, okay. So this is why the Torah was given in the desert. Now let's see the counting of the people. One of the things that Moses had to do was count. When they wanted to count the people, they used to go around the camp and write each person into a notepad. I'm not sure what, I translated from the Hebrew notepad. I don't know if they had pens or notepads.
A rollable one.
Yeah, or maybe with stone and the hammer. With their full name and their tribe. Later, the people in charge of the counting took all the notepads and started reading, Mr. So-and-so, tribe Levi, please write him in the book of Levi. When finishing the other 11, the tribe of Naphtali was left, and there was no need to look for it.
Temporary count, not necessarily for permanent purpose. They had special things easier than
Right, then this way, right. This is a description of how exactly they had to.
Who was going to play on the team?
Yeah.
There were things called papyrus in Egypt.
What is it?
Papyrus.
Papyrus,
They might have been in the desert.
They could have brought it from there.
Okay.
Why not?
So that's like the ancient version of paper.
Yes, the word paper comes from there.
From plants that grow on the Nile.
Paper from China, no?
True enough. But the word comes from the word papyrus.
Papyrus.
Which is a kind of plant that grows in the Nile, as well explained.
The Chinese produced the kind of modern kind of paper, made of whatever junk was available, rags and things
Isn't
like
that
that.
how they do it in Chinese culture?
Well, actually, they still do it today. They take whatever is available. Okay, so then let's get back to where we were with regards to, so they're counting the people, and then they put them in camps. Okay, and here is the camping. This is a quote from Bamidbar 2:2. The children of Israel shall encamp each man by his division with the flagstaff of their father's house. Some distance from the tent of meeting they shall encamp. Those camping in front to the east were the legions under the division of the camp of Judah. The legions under the division of the camp of Reuben were to the south. The legion under the division of the camp of Ephraim were to the west. And of course, the Dan was in the north. What?
This is how you organize the military.
You're absolutely right. There's yes, there is. It's one of the answers that's given with regards to the encampment because it was strategic, and we'll see also with the counting of the people. They first put the multiple ones were going on the front field, or the front line, and we had also a very big camp at the back in case the enemy would decide to ambush and attack from the back. So they had the middle was probably the most exposed part where the front and the rear ends were all. You're right. It has to do with the invasion. This was one of the opinions, and one of the opinions why they had to keep that division, why they had to camp and march in the very same structure, in the very same order.
So have the experience have to annex those territories?
Didn't annex anything. They were by God's instruction. They had to go from place to place.
Are
And
there
then
descriptions about the kind of minor fortifications they built during the travel when they stayed for a long time?
during the travel in the desert, they were not so concerned because they were protected. It was heavenly protected. It was the pillar of smoke, the pillar of fire that was it accompanied them on their journeys. It was when they had to engage in actually going through land in order to either get to the destination or nearing Israel.
More emotion than static.
Correct.
So
Yes.
fortification would make less sense.
Correct. Yes. I mean, there was fortification, but it wasn't made for security. It was meant more of respect, where the tabernacle was in the middle, and then there was some sort of a shift. They had shifts of people guarding it, serving it, and so on. But it wasn't much of a protection. First of all, there weren't many people altogether in the desert in those days, and second, they were not really afraid of enemies. The biggest danger in the desert were the scorpions, snakes, thirst, and so on and so forth.
That was Amalek, but that was apparently only one event.
Correct. Amalek was a unique time, and that was right after the splitting of the sea that had its time. So you're right. That war had to be fought by the Jews themselves. They couldn't rely on anyone. That's why Moses asked Yoshua to choose people, and they had to, with all that we learned from it. What?
You remember 2 years ago, I came directly to your house from Jordan.
Yes. When I was in Israel, yeah.
I was there at the same house of my very distant Jordanian relatives 15 years before that. Everything was fine. I never had the Israeli passport at that time. Okay, when I came the second time, it was, okay. And then I said, look, to my brother-in-law, let's say, 15 years ago, we saw beautiful stars there, but now there's a lot more houses. Can we go to the desert and watch the stars? He said, oh, that's dangerous. I said, what's dangerous? Yahoo? No, that's our local robbers.
Oh.
I'm afraid to drive there. I said, well, you blame all on the Jews.
Yeah, well, it's all the Jews' fault. I was talking to my brother now from last night he's in Brooklyn. My brother, I have a brother living in Brooklyn, and he's telling me about everyone has to stay home, and with the riots and everything that's going on. And my question is, what does this have to do with us? I mean, the Jews were never against blacks or anything. And he says to me, the Jews are always a target, and it's sad that you have a society as diverse. Okay, we're talking San Francisco now. And it's sad how you talk to me in Russia in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. Yes, the Jews were targets in Europe. In Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, yeah, they just. But in America, 2020, why are we a target? Yeah, I guess you're right. The history redictates itself. What?
To tell you a story.
Just a second. Yeah.
In New York City, which is not a stranger to racial tensions and ethnic tensions, right?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But there was one thing where there was something with the school board where the blacks were basically targeting the Jews and saying, accusing them of privilege and this and that, and doing kind of a racial thing.
Profiling.
This guy who was a Jewish teacher said he was the first person in his family to go to university and become a teacher. So it's, basically they were talking a lot of crap.
Mm-hmm.
But the ringleader of all this, who was inciting it all, was a black guy who later found out he had a Jewish ancestor.
Oh.
He became a cantor.
How ironic! Wow.
Amazing story. To see that man talk about how basically the Jews and the blacks and had a very solid relationship, and it dissolved.
I mean, I spoke to Ross today, and he told me about how always the Jewish people, Jewish representatives, are fighting for minorities and are always,
Yeah,
you know,
but
trying
it's
to.
always from the outside, almost always outside. Their relation was political more than deep, and that might.
Okay, but there was never a hatred from our side to the blacks. So then so there's nothing to reciprocate, right?
So
It's not.
the tribe is came from their own.
Yeah. What?
About a beautiful country named America.
Oh.
Do you know who wrote that song, America the Beautiful?
America the Beautiful?
Yes.
I don't know that song. No.
Somebody named Israel Bailey.
Really?
Yes. But in New York City, his name sounded so Jewish, he changed it to Urban Berlin.
Oh, really? Berlin? Oh, it changed to
He
Berlin.
changed it to Urban Berlin. Okay, so that's in that beautiful area. He gave, this song is called like the unofficial hymn of America, an unofficial anthem of America.
Really?
Yes, it glorifies America, but he was uncomfortable with a Jewish name in New York City.
Wow.
That's why he should.
Yeah, exactly.
That was when? When was it? 18th century?
1920.
1920. Wow. I know God Bless America, which is also always played by the national anthem, but I don't know.
It's not the national anthem.
No, it's always played. It's mostly played.
It is the national anthem, which is they ripped off the song from Britain. Just reworded it.
It was
What, the national anthem?
It was tradition at that time to reuse tunes for other purposes.
Wait, Star Spangled Banner is taken from somewhere.
The tune as tradition in those days is taken from somewhere.
What do
They
you
just
want
changed the
for
words.
these people who ripped off their language from Britain?
Yeah, well, you're right. That nobody could deny. Although you have Americans growing up and they say we don't know what they're talking in the UK, but that doesn't sound like English.
In the original publication in written form, the poet who wrote the words said to be sung to a tune of, and mentions the name of the traditional song it should be sung to.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Okay, you would think a national anthem is something an original composing, but anyways. Okay, so back to where we were. They were camping. They had to march in a very straight order, and everyone had to stay with their camp. And here, this comes from the breastplate, the choshen, that the Kohen, the high priest, used to wear. Of course, this is not the real thing. It's just a little. Urim v'Tumim was a piece of parchment that had God's name, God's explicit name of 72 letters. How could you say a name of 72 letters? That sounds not easily at all. Even if you study linguistics, that's already sacred. Okay, so the Urim v'Tumim, inside the breastplate, there was a space. There was, it had a little bit thickness, and then there was the little parchment inserted within that space behind the breastplate. And then when a time of need, when they needed to communicate with God with regards to, it was only with regards to a general question that had to do with the whole nation. For instance, should we initiate a war against this approaching threat? Should we not? And so on and so forth. It was matters of such. And then there was a whole ceremony where the high priest would wear his breastplate, and the king or the president or whoever was the leader at that time would propose that question. And then the letters that were engraved on the stones would actually shine, and they would consist of the answer. That's why on the breastplates we have all the letters, even names that were added letters in order to allow. For instance, as Yosef, I think it had Yehosef. There was the letter Hey was also there, and a few other letters where all the letters are appearing.
So it was made into a Sephardic name.
Yes. And interesting how Urim v'Tumim went out to be in Harvard. I think Harvard University, they have their logo. It says Urim v'Tumim on it, and there's a few Urim v'Tumim. I don't know exactly what the meaning of that, but that's the name of the parchment that's like divinity. That's like connecting to God through man-made, so to speak, means. So that's Urim v'Tumim. I think Harvard School has that.
There are so many
Urim v'Tumim. Anyway, the tribes had each one their distinction, their part, their stone in the breastplate.
So in this count of tribes, you count Yosef as a tribe, which means you also count Levi.
Right. Yes, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Yeah, you can look at the upper. You can't see here a little, but at the upper left, that's Levi. It says Levi on the thing. I can see on my screen. Here's what all the tribes. This is taken from the Midrash. Each tribe had to have colors on its banner corresponding to the colors of precious stone, which were on Aaron's breastplate. The banner of Reuven was red, and in the center a painted mandrake. That of Shimon was green, and in its center had a picture of Shechem. That of Levi had a tricolor, one stripe of white, one of black, and one of red. And in the center it carried a picture of Urim and Tumim. That's what we were just saying. Judah's banner had the color of the sky, and in the center a picture of lion. That's probably the most famous one. Everybody knows Judah is the lion. Issachar's banner was blackish, had in the center a picture of the sun and the moon. Zvulun had a whitish banner, which carried a picture of a ship in the center. Zvulun was a trader. Dan's banner had the color of sapphire and an image of serpent in the center. God's was a mixture of black and white and carried a picture of a camp. Naphtali had a peculiar color of pale reddish wine, and the picture of center was that of a hind. Asher's banner bore the color of precious stone, the ornament of a woman, and the picture of an olive tree in the center. The color of Joseph's banner was a deep black and had the following pictures: Egypt, then an ox representing Ephraim, and a unicorn representing Manasseh. By the way, there's several versions. Some versions have Joseph's picture with the sheaves of the dream that he was dreaming. And Benjamin's banner, the last one, had some of the colors of each tribe. That is 12 different colors, and the picture of a wolf in the center as they were compared to wolf. So quite fascinating, quite interesting. We'll
based on the blessings of Yaakov.
Correct. Yaakov and then Moshe, of course, they corresponded in a later generation. Yes, Yaakov's blessing to his own children and Moshe's blessing to the tribe before passing away. So we could see that there's quite firm the fact that each one has their color, their stone, their banner, their flag, their camp. And the question is, why is it so? Why is it so important?
Coats of arms for families.
What?
Jewish equivalent of coats of arms for families.
Even stronger.
Yes.
Not only that, some of the colors seem to
Woven, that's his name, Woven, no? I don't know. Interesting. But there was a ruby stone.
Many of his banners follow the rules of heraldic.
I'll ask him.
Makes sense. The same rules about the proper contrast of colors.
Interesting. He's asking whether Reuben has to do with the ruby stone. Ruby is red? I don't know. Interesting question.
English, right?
Yeah.
Hebrew, right?
I don't know, but Reuben, ruby, I don't know.
Your Englishman has not invented any language. He stole everything from French, Latin, German, and everything else.
Yes, it's a bastard language.
Therefore, it's not English.
But Hebrew is not
Yeah.
right?
Okay, look at this. They have to be anyone in their tribe. What happens if they want to marry? Every daughter from the tribe of the children of Israel who inherits property shall marry a member of her father's tribe. So each one of the children of Israel shall inherit the property of his forefathers, meaning don't mix in. Everybody's Jewish, everybody's nice, stay with your tribe. Very interesting. We'll see now a story.
Was that in general or specific for the daughters of Zerubbabel?
It was for the convenience matters. It was more, because exactly you follow the father. We're talking about it last week, where you follow the father and the mother. The tribal distinction goes by the father, and that's why the daughters. All right, that we talk about the person who had no inheritance because his father was an Egyptian fellow. And with the fighting and everything.
Every daughter who inherits property. In context, it refers to a daughter of Zerubbabel.
Yes, it does. The verse was said.
Most daughters of tribe of Israel do not inherit property.
Correct. It was the sons that were.
I think it's not good from the genetic pool point of view.
Yeah.
We improved in the Middle Ages. That's when we got smart.
Yeah. That's when you stop marrying cousins. Okay. And this is what the Mishnah says. No, sisters were never married. Other than Cain, other than Hevel, and Cain there was no one else, right? What about what? Yeah. Oh, my nieces, my wife's grandfather and my wife's grandmother are an uncle and a niece. Yeah, that's back in Tunisia. Yeah, my wife is, her grandfather, the father of her father, and the mother of her father. They're an uncle and a niece. So, yeah, it's kind of...
question. You have Wi-Fi here?
I do. It connect to TJC, and the password is 770 3 times. TJC, Taipei Jewish Center. 770 770 770.
007 would have been cooler.
Yeah, could have been cooler, but no.
In context, 770 is cooler.
It's cooler.
Context.
Okay, let's see what the Gemara says. The Mishnah taught that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said there were no days as happy for the Jewish people as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. The Gemara has granted Yom Kippur is a day of joy because it has the elements of pardon and forgiveness. Next time you think Yom Kippur, think joy. And moreover, it is the day which the last pair of the tablets were given. Of course, this is when the Torah was reintroduced. However, what is so special about the 15th of Av? Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, the name of Shmuel, this was the day on which the members of different tribes were permitted to enter one another's tribe by intermarriage. It was initially prohibited. What? No. It was from that day on. It was initially prohibited to intermarry between tribes so as to keep each plot of land within the portion of the tribe that originally inherited it. So again, this is more of a convenience tool. Everyone stay with the tribe. But since the 15th of Av, it was a time when that decree was annulled, and they said, whatever it is, you can marry whoever you wish. Also, in generations to come, there was a very horrible story that took place in the tribe of Benjamin. It's called Pilegesh Bagiva, right? Pilegesh Bagiva is that woman that was viciously raped and murdered by people from the tribe of Benjamin, and her husband wasn't a husband, it was her...
to some extent, every nightmare of horror was set down by the Jews.
Correct. And the person who was with her was so affected by what had happened to this poor lady that after she was dead, they actually, it's horrible, but they cut her to pieces, and they cut it to 12 pieces, and they made some sort of package, and they sent pieces of that corpse to each tribe of Israel with a note saying, look what the tribe of Benjamin did. And that followed a very serious war against the tribe of Benjamin. The tribe of Benjamin was nearly wiped out. I think there were 600 people left from the tribe of Benjamin after everyone, literally all the other 11 tribes, went to war against them. And then finally they stopped because they realized that they're basically annihilating a part of the Jewish people, and later reconciled with it, and then the tribe of Benjamin could marry. Anyway, this also took place on the 15th of Av. Very interesting story. As you see, our Tanakh is filled with stories, some good and some not so good. We say the truth.
Once a year?
What?
Once a year only?
No, 15th of Av from that day on. No. The 15th of Av is also a very interesting celebration that happens once a year, where this is kind of the engagement day, where people go out, and the daughters of Jerusalem would go out to the field and would dance there, and the young bachelors would each want to be impressed with a woman, and that's one of the celebrations that takes place, why that's such a good day. But anyway, just with regards to the context of what we brought it, the time until 15th of Av, the first 15th of Av in the desert, was that nobody could marry different tribes, and of course later this was cancelled. But our question remains the same: why is it so? Why initially everyone has to stay with their tribe? What is the reason why it's enforced on us, that type of segregation, that type of separation? What's so good about it? Even more so, what?
Ruby.
That's ruby stone. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, ruby and Reuben. Nice. Okay. We'll look it up.
No,
we'll see.
I found it red.
Yeah.
He's not red.
No, he's not red. No, he's not red. Okay.
I'm red?
Yes. In your heart. And I don't need blood.
Your heart is red. My heart is red too.
You.
Just think San Francisco.
Yes.
Just think San Francisco. Tolerance, diversity. The sages taught us in Braita.
I want to understand, we are not supposed to intermarry. Normally speaking, to keep the Jewish faith, to keep our spirit all together, etc. But they were all Jews. What is the point?
That's our question today. Okay, not only were they not allowed to intermarry, we said they had their own camp, they had their own march, they had their own flag, their own anthem, their own sign. They couldn't marry. Look at this. They had their own judges. The sages taught in the Raita. From where it is derived that society must establish judges for the Jewish people. Hold on. The verse states, you shall place judges and officers over you in all your gates that the Lord your God gives you for your tribes. And they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. From where it is derived that society must also establish judges not only for the entire Jewish people, but also for each and every tribe. The verse states, you shall place judges and officers for your tribes. Imagine this. You have two tribes that are literally one by the other, and then there's a conflict between someone, and or for instance, there's a city which has several people from different tribes, and there's a conflict, and he says, I don't want to go to your judges, I want to go to my judges. What kind of anarchy is that? Right? Not only are supposed to stay in their own place, but they have their own judges. Of course, you would say their own judges would rule according to their own people, and that would cause a lot of mess. You wanted to say something, Rick?
They can make 12 cities when they get to Israel.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more than 12 cities, but trust me, the Jews managed to.
It's called extraterritoriality.
Okay. Okay. You think this was only then? Look what Maimonides says about coming. Mashiach is coming in the time of the redemption. Laws of kings during the era of Messianic king. Once his kingdom has been established and all Israel is gathered around him, the entire nation's line of descent will be established on the basis of his words and the prophetic spirit which will rest upon him. As Malachi states, he shall sit as a refiner and purifier. When he defines the lineage of the Israelites, he will make known their tribal lineage alone, stating he is from this tribe and he is from another tribe. Again, that distinction seemed to escort us and to remain with us even in the time of Mashiach. You say this, you're from this tribe.
The Ramban there is make explicit that Shem will not be revealed, that an Amselim will not be revealed.
Correct. He said Mishpachot shel Itmon Itmo. He says that I think in one or two laws before that. He says that people who were a part of the Jewish people, they're already a part of the Jewish people. They will not be called out to say, he's coming from a non-pure background, or Mamzerim, of course, are not. It's not their fault, right? We know it was never their fault to begin with. But that distinction of tribal seems to take us even in the future. Everyone would have their tribal lineage, and of course, this fortifies the question: why?
A couple of years before the coming of Mashiach, someone converts kasher to Judaism. That person knows that has no tribe. Nevertheless, the tribe will reveal for him.
Interesting, yeah. Because where the soul descends from, right? We know that every person who converts actually had belonging to the Jewish people to begin with, and this is just discovering what was already there. And look, this is the source of it. What? Ben Avraham, right? We call Ben Avraham. We don't know, right? We don't know if somebody comes from Taiwan and wants to convert. We don't know what tribe they belong to. Some people say the 10 tribes are Chinese. It wouldn't hurt to have 1.4 billion Jews around. That's quite of a boost, I think, if we have.
Mormons say the American Indians are the lost tribes.
Okay.
There is Talmud now in Korea. It's in every house.
Oh yeah, Talmud in Korea. Yeah, I know some Israelis are making money off of that. I'll tell you later about Talmud in Korea. And the source of it is the book of Yechezkel, one of the prophecies of Yechezkel, Ezekiel chapter 48, and he says there's 12 gates, and the gates of the city, that's Jerusalem, shall be after the names of the tribes of Israel. 3 gates to the north. Let the gate of Reuben is one, the gate of Judah is one, the gate of Levi, and the eastern side 4,500 measures, and 3 gates, the gate of Joseph, the gate of Benjamin, and so on and so forth. Ezekiel says a prophecy about the city of Jerusalem, which actually is going to have 12 gates. Again, this whole distinction, everyone's tribe, everyone's gate. What is the story? So one of the reasons that's given, which is what Rick touched upon earlier, which is
the cardinals don't seem to match the geography of the tribes on the land. They must be follow something else. They go down to the east. Historically, Gran is either north or west.
Right, Dan.
The gate is to the east.
Someone is actually paying attention to what's going on. I agree with you. Dan was not in Dan was in the north. You're right. Yeah. What?
One more point about Jordan. There is an ancient map showing, I think it came from the coin, showing where the tribes were.
Yeah.
And a couple of tribes were on the side of Mount Nebo in Jordan, today's Jordan.
Yes.
Including them. Okay. Now, they were building the new tram line next to the Knesset,
Okay.
maybe it's already done.
The light rail, הרכבת הקלה, yeah. Or called tram, yeah. Not Trump, tram, yeah, tram,
Yes.
not Trump. Okay.
Trump will be there. Transportation.
Trump will be there.
Yes, that's another story.
Okay.
So there is the Israel Museum there.
Yes.
Just next to the Knesset. And there was all these displays, maps, whatever. And then there was a huge fence around that building site because, well, you're not supposed to walk into the works, into the construction. And to enliven the fence, they just hung some stuff from the museum onto the fence.
Yes.
Okay, when I went to Jordan, they said, we saw some of our Arab brethren, we saw the map in front of the Knesset that shows you want to conquer Jordan now.
Oh, that's what they told you in Jordan, that they're going to conquer.
I've never seen that. Sure, there is a map like that. Show me on the internet. Oh, it doesn't work. Maybe the Jews control the internet.
Of course they do.
Okay, and then I went back to Israel, like I first saw Jordan, I went back to Knesset. I saw that map. That's not today's plan.
Yeah, let's go conquer.
1,000 years.
Let's go conquer Jordan, as if we have nothing better to do with our time. Okay, so one of the elements touches what Rick was saying earlier. This was actually a strategic plan. This is the way they wanted to conquer, to enter the land of Israel. And as we said, I'll put another time the map with the numbers, with the figures, because that shows about here. About the numbers. So the camp of Judah had 186,400. That was the biggest camp. And that went front. Follow that was the camp of Reuben, then the camp of Ephraim, and in the end the camp of Dan, which was number 2, in the amount 157,600. So that was kind of strategic way to conquer the land of Israel, which is the reason why they had to encamp and to follow the same order in going. So the camp of Dan would actually will go in the back, and would be Me'asef, will be the one that will be in the end of everything, that the Abarbanel brings it, and that's why the front lines were manned by Judah, which of course was the biggest of the warriors. Okay, there we were here. Okay, so for strategic reasons, this was the counting of the people, and that's why they had to encamp and they had to be separated because of their ways of, just like you have military with different units and different jobs, different positions, everyone should man. But this could be maybe an explanation for why things were back then. But what about the future? We said we're waiting for Mashiach, 12 tribes, 12 gates of Jerusalem, and each one will be
belonging. Even strategic reasons, it does not explain a restriction about intermarriage.
Right, you're right, absolutely right. Why would it be different? Correct. So, there was a story with the Kotzker Rebbe. The Kotzker Rebbe lived in a place named Kotsk, which probably Betzalel could tell us where was Kotsk. I don't know where it was, somewhere in Eastern Europe. It's probably somewhere in Eastern Europe. Okay, so there was a chassid, a disciple, a student of the Kotzker Rebbe, who came to his Rebbe, to his master, and crying and weeping. And he says, I have to get your advice. My life has changed drastically recently, and I don't know what to do. And he said, what happened? He says, for 20 years, I've been studying Torah because my father-in-law, who is wealthy, paid me my expenses, and all I needed to do was just study Torah, and he would take care of the physical matters. He would provide for myself, for my family, and so on. Unfortunately, 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, and I had to actually take responsibility for the whole business, everything that was done before that. And since he didn't say that, but since he's a qualified individual and a very smart one, so of course he had to handle the business. And thank God, he says to the Rebbe, the business is doing wonderful. We're actually doing much better than we did 6 months ago. But, so he says, so what's the problem? He says, but now I have no time to study. I used to study all day long, and now I have to be tied with business, everything, the expenses and the stress and everything that's around it. And that's why he was crying with great tears. So the Rebbe looked at him, and he says to him the following. He says, yes, indeed, you're missing on the mitzvah of studying Torah, but you're gaining many, many other mitzvahs. You're gaining many other things. Now that you are in the position, you can give charity, you can give loans to people, you could do grace with other people, and you could conduct your business with honesty and you should do things in the right way. Other people will look at you and you say, we can see how you can do business and how you should do business. So why do you think that this causes less pleasure to God? You think that by studying Torah, God is so delighted. Oh, Shmuel, my friend, is studying Torah. I'm so happy. He says, what makes you think that if you'll do business, would God be less happy? I could tell you, He won't be less happy. Probably be as happy or even more happy than that. So this is just an introduction to what we're going to say. The facts are that we are different. We are different from each other. Everyone has, their way of understanding things, and everyone has their qualities and their fields where they're better at. Some people are more analytic. Some people are more into math. Some people are into physics. Some people into languages. And some people are just good at doing things with their hands. Some people have a talent to teach and to gift other people, right? Some people are very, very intelligent, but they coming to explain to someone, they can't. They just they're not blessed with that piece of talent, And everyone is different. Everyone has something they're good at and something they're less good at.
That's a very sensible way to distinguish among people, not by the birthplace.
Okay, so we're trying to see what caused what, right? And what we're going to see now is that, in fact, the fact is we are different than each other. And because we are different, we don't want to be pushed into a mechanism where everyone is the same, does the same, looks the same, has the same flag, has to stay in the same camp. The fact that there is a segregation, there is a separation, actually gives everyone the possibility for the individual to express himself. You have 12 different ways to worship God, to serve God, to be a Jew. And then even if you don't fit in one of these things, you manage to find from here and from there until you have the way to express yourself in the right way. What?
You transcend the tribe and go to another tribe?
Well, technically you cannot. But we're saying, first of all, now we don't have any tribes, right? You know that, right? We don't know, besides the people who are Kohanim.
When did we start to forget about the tribal belonging? Maybe in the time in Babel?
Well, there is a new tribe.
Yeah, as soon as the separation between the kingdoms and then the losing, we lost.
The separation between the kingdoms, that already started.
I think so. I believe that was when we lost track of.
We know that Mordechai still remembered he was specifically from Benjamin.
Correct.
Already by that time many people had.
That was an exception. Yes. That was an exception for the scripture to actually to remember that he knows his tribal belonging. What?
You said fortunately, and I perfectly agree with that. But unfortunately, when you go to Israel, everybody will be defined by his birthplace.
Yeah, I know. This is not perfect. It's far from being perfect.
אתה צרפתי, אתה רוסי,
אתה אמריקאי,
אתה צבר.
זה מילא, אבל אתה לובש כזה כיפה, אתה חרדי, יש לך זקן, אתה חומני, יש לך, זה מילא איפה שאתה בא, מילא. Anyway, the difference is between, we take two tribes, Bulun and Issachar likes to trade, he knows how to trade, and he's staying by the seashores. That's what Moses, Yaakov also gives him. And on the other hand, Zvulun likes to trade, Issachar likes to study, and that's why he's compared to a donkey. Donkey is an animal that you can load on and continue loading on, just like my little Mazda, which you see, you can load a lot of stuff on, and it still drives. Well, a donkey can carry. Issachar takes someone with that type of talent to accumulate knowledge.
A Greek trader met a trader from Zebulun. Given the geography and place, we will call that minor Phoenician.
Interesting. Okay.
And if you meet a woman, you would want her, and then she will shake your hand.
Okay, we'll talk about it a little later. Not in front of the kids, please. Okay, so tolerance. Okay. Moshe Sloni, he passed away already. One of the prominent Chabad Hasidim in Israel. And he was in charge of the Chabad school system in Israel for many, many, many years. And because of his role, he was involved with people in the politics. And every year in Rosh Hashanah, he used to invite people home from the Ministry of Education, the Minister of Education, the Vice Minister, people who are to do with his day-to-day job. And one of their treats was that they would go to see Kfar Chabad. Kfar Chabad is a village that Chabad Hasidim live in Israel, not far from Lud. You came to visit me there.
Everybody there asked me, did you see that building in the middle of
Yeah.
Parhapa? Then they didn't see it.
Oh, you didn't see it?
So your house.
Oh, so it wasn't so great. It's not my house, I just rented it. Anyways, Moshe Slonim decided one year that he's had enough with all these visitors and guests, and he decided that this year, even though he's inviting people, he will disperse them to other people's houses, because he wants to stay in synagogue after the prayer and actually pray slowly and at length, and no rush, nobody's waiting. He made sure with his wife and his children, and he might come a little late, because Rosh Hashanah is a very special day, it's an auspicious day, and we want to say prayers. We'd like to sit aside and pray at his own pace, at his own rhythm. By the way, I'm not sure we talked about it once or twice, about Jewish meditation, which is actually prayer. Prayer is where you have the way to express yourself, to connect, to bond to God, and so on, which is a lot of the foundations that meditation, other meditation has. And he decided this year, that's it. I've had enough. I want to pray. And he's saying that, he's got his guests and he dispersed them to other places, and now he's free to go. And he's sitting in synagogue after the prayer. He wants to say his own prayer slowly and quietly. And then he raises his eyes from the sitter and he sees a couple, a man and a woman, standing there in the corner. And of course, they seem a little awkward, a little weird and kind of don't belong. And he approaches them just by being a nice person. And they tell him, it's Rosh Hashanah. And we both come from traditional houses, but years ago we have been not traditional, not observant. And we were driving by and we saw the sign Kfar Chabad, and we said, it's Rosh Hashanah, why don't we go in? And as we go in, they came to synagogue, there were very little people there, because you wanted to stay after the prayer. And then they asked him, what do you do here, and where do we get Rosh Hashanah food? And then, so of course, he closed the sitter and he took him home with him. And he says to his wife, I have some guests. And then he realized, I guess everyone has to do their job. Some people could stay in synagogue and pray at length, and some people need to host people for Rosh Hashanah. I guess, he was trying to get away with that, but he couldn't, because from heaven they sent people over. So he realized. So this is what the Rebbe says. It is known that the distinction of each Jew according to their tribe has to do with the manner in which each serves God, since each individual differs in their actions, as it expressed in Jacob's blessing to each tribe. So, in their spiritual deeds, the service of God separates to 12 different ways. 12 different ways, I'd say, as a comment, in a general way. And each tribe carries their own way, meaning there's not one set of standard where this is how you serve God. No, there's several, maybe 12. Don't get me wrong, 12 is a lot of things. 12 is quite a big number, considering that.
Farmers, shoemakers.
Yeah, that of course that's trading, but the way they serve God. And that is why we have all that separation, all those flags, right? Each flag has a different title, different animal, different color. And all these flags, right, they all represent something. Of course, like we said earlier, we cannot determine which tribe we belong to and where we descend from. This is going to be when Mashiach will come, everyone will know where they're coming from. And this is, by the way, how the Rebbe answers about having non-kosher, right? Reuben has the mandrake on it, and that's one of the things that is mentioned in the interpretations, right? That Reuben he took the mandrake when his mother, right? It was from Rachel. Then he gave it to Rachel, lekachat edudei bni, right? She told him that he take, and Reuben was expressing his concern and his responsibility for the family. And on the tribe of Shimon, there was the city of Shechem, which reminded what Shimon did when things were going off the track. And here's what I was looking at non-kosher animals. The fact we find pictures of non-kosher animals, a snake for Dan, a wolf for Benjamin, etc., is elaborated in the Midrash that each picture had to do with the qualities of this specific tribe. So we must have had this animal to represent it. So it doesn't mean we should eat it, right? No eating snakes and no eating wolves. Don't eat snakes and don't try to eat wolves.
It's non-kosher.
Non-kosher animals. You see the idea where we have kosher and non-kosher doesn't only has to do with our diet. It is the reason why we're allowed to consume only certain types of animal, not predators. And we explained that at length when we were talking about kosher and non-kosher.
It's a symbol that is Solar temperature side because has been used for wrong, but it's the pole as a symbol for the whole of the Jewish people.
What is it?
The pole.
The bowl?
The pole.
Ah, bowl. Oh, really? Oh, that was,
It, as you know, it's a symbol that is absolutely true, but it has been used for wrong too.
yeah, well, I guess you could use all symbols for different ways. Yeah, I agree. And this also helps us with answering one of the questions we asked at the beginning about the different type of prayers that we said, different prayer books, you go into a Sephardi synagogue, you hear melodies in that way, different tunes from an Ashkenazi synagogue.
So beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with you. Don't get me wrong. There are differences between Ashkenazi and Sephardi, between Catalonian and Italian in their prayer books. My master, the Arizal, Ari HaKadosh, Rabbi Yitzchak Luya, used to say there are 12 gates in the heaven against 12 tribes, and each one has his or her prayer ascend through a different gate. These are the gates mentioned in Ezekiel, right? We said about the prophecy, the gates of Jerusalem, and he said that certainly the gates are different from each other, hence the prayers are also different. Therefore, each person should hold on to their own customs. Perhaps they are from this specific tribe, and their prayers are to ascend through this specific gate. So in other words, instead of looking at it in a way that, what we said earlier, why it has to be different, is because we are different. Because each one is different, because each one has a gate, each one has a way to connect to God, and that's what we're trying, that's what we're after, to find the specific gate that through that our prayers can ascend. And we'll just conclude with a little story about the rich man and the coachman. It was a story that was told by one of the Hasidic masters, I don't recall who it was. This rich man who went with his coachman, and half hour before Shabbos, they came into a city, and the coachman, the driver, went to shower quickly, and of course also the rich man went to shower, and they both went to shul, went to synagogue, but different several minutes before the other. And the rich man came out first, and as he was walking, he saw a Jewish person stuck with the wheels of his trolley, his chariot inside the mud, and he was already dressed in Shabbos clothes. But he realized, this person needs help, and soon Shabbat is starting. Why don't I go and help him? But since he was a spoiled person and he wasn't so used to physical effort, he went and he tried to help. And indeed, he made some help, but all of his clothes became dirty, and he himself was filled with mud. And he couldn't go like this to synagogue. He looked like a disaster. He helped a Jew, he helped someone, but he couldn't go to shul because he felt so bad about how he was all full with mud. And it was despicable for someone at his level. A few minutes passed by, and the coachman, the driver, walks out of the hotel and goes to shul. And he gets to shul, and there were people there, and there were some people there that needed a place to eat, a place to stay. Now, normally how it went in ancient times was the people who didn't have where to eat would wait in the synagogue until the end of the prayer, and then people would collect them on their way. I mean, I'm saying ancient times. It's not so ancient when the yeshiva in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights. When I studied in yeshiva, it was 2004. They already have a dining room and everything. But when they studied there in the 80s, in the 70s, in the 80s, and perhaps even later, there was not a fixed dining room. There was no budget for that. And then the guys would actually be dispersed in families. So you would just stay there after the prayer. I mean, it didn't happen to me, but I know it happened because, as I said, I'm still young.
There is someone who invites, in the time that was possible, up to a few months ago, invites travelers for dinner.
Okay, well, travelers for dinner, right? Yeah, people from outside the city. Anyway, so, of course, the prayer is over, and our coachman is there, and there's a lot of guests that need a place to stay, but he's not entitled to invite anyone. It's not his food, it's not his money, it's not his place to stay. So the Rebbe, I don't know whoever said that, I don't recall who said the story, he said, let's imagine it was the other way around. Let's say the coachman would come out of the hotel first. He would see someone stuck in the mud. Within several minutes, he would get him out, probably without getting dirty, because he knew how to do and what to do. And the rich man would get to the shul and get all the guests that needed a place to stay, and he would offer them a place to stay. So we could say when the coachman does what the rich man is supposed to do, the rich man does what the coachman is supposed to do, then everyone loses. And of course, this is a parable for everyone has their way of doing things, and it's specifically, we're talking earlier about San Francisco and about some criticism about San Francisco between the feminist movement and all kinds of different things that are going on. But the idea behind it is when people want to mimic and emulate others, I want to do what other people are doing. Do like me, do what I do, say what I say. But this is wrong. This is wrong. We need to follow each one their own path towards God. Yes?
In the other hand, when the rich man in the story found the situation was, he did what he had to, even was not the best that could have been done.
Right. It's just saying, you would imagine what happens when each one doesn't do their job. It could be the job is done. Don't get me wrong, even if you pray in a different way than you're supposed to pray, you will get to heavens. But the question is, would you have the best means possible to do it? So just to summarize, that segregation, that separation is not negative. It is positive. It is a way each one can express himself in our connection, in our bond with God. And that's why this started in the tribes in the desert when they had each one their flag and their camp, and it continues through their journeys. And of course, even when the time of Mashiach will come, everyone would have their way of connecting and communicating with God. And we should not only not oppose that, but we should endorse that, because that's the beauty of. And of course, as a side note, I have to say, and the comment has to be made, it is all within the realm of the Jewish world. It is all within the realm of the will of God, right? Not inventing different things where nothing has the source and just throwing a prayer book out of the window and printing something where of course, New Age, yeah. Thank you. I was looking for that word, New Age. Okay, New Age is not